Thank you, Seattle. On this occasion of the celebration of Advent of Sri Ramana Maharshi to Arunachala, San Diego is choosing to do a reading from Upadesha Saram. Verse 1, by the will of the Creator, action bears fruit. Is action then supreme? No, it is inert, unconscious. This is the fundamental answer to the ultimate question. We cannot perform actions and expect those actions to result in the desired fruits. The Creator, Ishvara or Shiva, is the Lord of action and determines what fruits and what subsequent actions will be forthcoming. We not only cannot control the fruits of our behavior, we cannot even choose the actions themselves, since these are influenced by an endless series of past actions. So action is in itself inert, unconscious. It and its fruits are Ishvaras. Do we choose our dream actions? No. For the Maharishi, waking and dream have the same degree of reality. Verse 2, the fruits of action are not everlasting, and they cause one to fall into the great ocean of karma, blocking spiritual progress. Our actions, good or bad, obviously brings results which cause us to experience pleasure and pain. Such are transient, but they leave seeds of desire or fear in our minds, causing us to repeat or avoid the previous actions. These seeds or vasanas involve us in an endless series of commitments and events which bind us to the outer world and prevent us from turning inward and discovering our true nature. Therefore, no salvation or freedom from rebirth is to be found in activities, no matter how important or virtuous they may seem. Verse 3, that action which is done without personal desire and whose fruits are surrendered to the Lord purifies the mind and leads to liberation. Actions in themselves, together with their fruits, serve to bind the individual. This verse shows, nevertheless, how action may lead indirectly to salvation. If one acts in a detached and selfless manner, with no intention of obtaining personal benefit, this is a form of devotion to the Lord, benefiting his creation and freeing the mind from craving and restlessness. Verse 4, ritual worship, repetition of sacred names, and meditation are done with the body, the speech, and the mind, and they progress in excellence in that order. In this verse, the Maharshi advises that the less physically active and exteriorized religious disciplines are, the more effective they become. He has said, we project ourselves into idols and worship them because we do not understand true inward worship. The Maharshi assigns a limited and preliminary value to rituals. The vain waste their time like brutes in the fruitless illusions of tapas, yajna, holy waters, visiting sacred shrines, the worship of God's gifts, etc. But you should abandon all these as they tend to rebirth. Verse 5, to serve the Lord, looked upon as to serve the world, looked upon as a manifestation of the Lord, is to offer worship to the Lord of the eight forms. To perform our ordained part in life, remembering always that in doing so, we are serving the Lord's own creation, is to worship Shiva effectively. Verse 6, silent meditation in the mind is higher than the best devotional praise or the uttering of sacred names loudly or softly. Bhagavan says that the quieter and more internal the devotional practice, the more effective it is. He does not reject the singing of hymns or the recitation of devotional poetry. His devotees sang his verses while begging food in Sri Ramana Ashram or walking with him around the sacred Arunachala hill. Verse 7, like an unbroken flow of oil or a stream of water, Continuous meditation is better than that which is interrupted. The potential power of meditation is to be achieved only when meditation is prolonged. The power is dissipated when the mind turns to exterior matters. The Maharshi has at times commented that fixed programs of meditation at certain hours are of limited value. One should endeavor at all times to hold on to the I thought. He advised that meditation depends on strength of mind and must be unceasing, even when one is engaged in work. Special hours may be helpful, but are meant for novices. Verse 8. Meditation on the identity of the individual and the Lord, I am He, is more purifying than meditation which assumes a difference between them. To assume that there is an ultimate distinction between the Lord and the meditator is to deny his total presence and to limit his being and power and knowledge. It involves the person in all the contradictions of dualism, causing one to wrestle with imagined problems of identity and behavior, which only strengthen the ego. Nevertheless, at a certain level of devotional meditation, the Maharshi accepted a dualist approach as helpful. He himself wrote poetries of great beauty and deep devotion to Arunachala. Shankara too wrote devotional hymns, seemingly dualist in tone, but ultimately moving the devotee toward a sense of oneness with the Lord. In any case, the final necessity for the meditator is to turn his attention inward to the self, rather than outward toward any image or concept, no matter how sacred. Verse 9. By the power of meditation, devoid of thoughts, one is established in true being, and this is supreme devotion. When asked by visitors for spiritual instruction, the Maharshi sometimes referred them to Upadesha Saram and gave its central message as stilling the mind and remaining free from thoughts. The ending of thought is true bhakti and is the beginning of wisdom and bliss. It is supreme devotion because the self and the Lord are identical. Often he has told us that only a true bhakta can be a true jnani, and only a true jnani can be a true bhakta. Total attention to the self, unclouded by extraneous thoughts, is the same as surrender to the Lord, there being no activity of the ego. This inactivity of the ego occurs when the meditator turns his attention away from all other matters and focuses attention solely upon the I. Paradoxically, the ego is thereby destroyed, being deprived of the support it requires from otherness. Verse 10. The practice of fixing the mind in its own source in the heart is, without doubt, true bhakti, yoga, and understanding. Whatever path is used by the aspirant for self-realization, and whatever may be emphasized, whether action or devotion or breath control or knowledge, it all amounts in the end to the necessity of absorbing the mind and thereby freeing the jiva from the tyranny of thought. Verse 11. The mind may be subdued by regulating the breath, just as a bird is restrained when caught in a net. This practice controls the mind. Breath restraint is effected in rather violent ways by hatha yogis, resulting in complete stoppage or kumbhaka. The Maharshi did not recommend such extremes and used the word kumbhaka in the sense of regulation to be accomplished by watching the intake and outflow of breath. This causes the rate of respiration to slow down and in turn tends to quiet the mind, which is then able to keep its attention on the I or self. In any case, the Maharshi did not give breath control a high priority. He said, one need not attempt breath control. Mind control is enough. Breath control is recommended for the man who cannot control his mind straight away. It may do as an aid, but can never lead to the goal itself. A more advanced man will naturally go directly to control of mind without wasting his time in practicing control of breath. Verse 12. Mind and breath, manifesting in thought and action, branch out from a common source, the Shakti. Since breathing and thinking are rooted in the same life force, The control of one amounts to control of the other. One might oversimplify by saying, each time an individual breathes, the mind cerebrates. No breath, no thought, no thought, no breath. In the story of the goblin Vetala, Vasishtha tells Rama, both are one only, like the flower and its fragrance, or sesame seed and the oil in it. Prana and mind stand to one another in the relationship of the supporter and the supported. If either of them is slain, then the other will also cease to exist. The destruction of both will confer moksha on all. The greatness of Upadesha Saram lies not so much in the content of each verse as in the way that the poem ties together all the major margas or paths of spiritual discipline. In this verse, for instance, there is nothing new. In the earliest of all his writings, Who Am I? Maharshi says, the source of the mind on the one hand and of breath and vital forces on the other is one and the same. Verse 13, absorption or laya and destruction or nasa are the two kinds of mind control. When merely absorbed, it emerges again, but not when it is destroyed. When the jiva is able to bring about the temporary absorption of the mind by pranayama, he experiences in that state a form of samadhi or experience of reality in which the ego ceases to intrude and intense happiness is enjoyed. But as soon as breath control ceases, the I am the body sense resumes and the jiva returns to his normal active state of bondage with its pains and pleasures. Sri Maharshi describes it this way: the involution of the mind in the self, but without its destruction, is Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Even though one practices it for years together, if one has not rooted out the vasanas, he will not attain salvation. Verse 14. When the mind has been suspended by breath restraint, it may then be annihilated by single-minded attention to the self. Once the mind has been calmed by the regulation of the breath, one should hold one's attention on the self, seeking the identity of the I. If this practice persists, eventually all other mental activity will dry up and the stream of thoughts will disappear. Then, in the absence of the sense of separateness from the Lord and from the world, a sense which thought has sustained, one arrives at the knowledge that there is only one consciousness and the individual is only that. Verse 15. What action remains to be done by that great yogi whose mind has been extinguished and who rests in his own true and transcendent state of being? Here, the question refers to the state of the Jivan Mukta, or realized man. When asked about this, the Maharshi explained that the Jnani is fully aware that his true state of being remains fixed and stationary, and all actions go on around him. There may be no difference between a Jnani and an Ajnani in their conduct. The difference lies in the angles of vision. The ignorant man identifies himself with the ego and mistakes its activities for those of the self, whereas the ego of the Jnani has been lost. Verse 16. If one's attention is turned away from external objects of sense and focused on the light of the self, that is the true vision of reality. To realize the self, it is necessary to give one's attention solely to the I, the first person. This is possible only if one turns his attention away from otherness, from other things and other persons that make up the objective world, and away from images and ideas that relate to the world. This process is what the Maharshi has termed Atma Vichara, or self-inquiry. If one leaves aside Vichara, the most efficacious sadhana, there are no other adequate means whatsoever to make the mind subside. If made to subside by other means, it will remain as if subsided, but will rise again. And with this, we turn over the satsang to the Hawaii group. Thank you.